Hello everyone, this is Chiang at the Pacific Asia Travel Association, the Department of Sustainability and Social Responsibility. Every year, one third of the world food is lost or goes to waste. The COVID-19 crisis has showcased the importance of our food value chain as one of the primary needs. It has also caused major changes in how people buy and consume food, with a shift away from restaurants to eating more at home and increased e-commerce deliveries. During the lockdown, more food has been going to waste throughout the supply chain, especially for the export-oriented agricultural and fishery products. The local markets are not ready to absorb such large volumes of produce, and just organic waste levels have increased substantially. Tourism is recognized as a strategic industry to reduce food waste. In order to do so, it is crucial that all sources and amounts of food waste being produced in the tourism industry are properly understood. Although the health crisis will likely outgrow the environmental concerns at the moment, tourism businesses need to rethink investment in responsible recovery, addressing key environmental issues, including food waste, for a more sustainable future. Today, Pata spoke to Daniel Butcher, the senior executive sous chef at Bangkok Marriott Marquis Queen's Park, to explore why it is important to tackle food waste during the pandemic, what lessons learned are there for sustainable recovery, and how hospitality and tourism businesses can strengthen their food waste management post COVID 19. Hello, Daniel. Thank you so much for your time today. We are so excited to have you with Potter in this interview series discussing the issue of food waste in hospitality and tourism. To get us started, would you mind introducing about yourself so that our audience can know a bit more about you, please?
Hi, also nice to be on this call with you, and thanks for calling in and checking in. My name's Chef Daniel. I have been in Thailand now for close to 10 years. I'm originally from Germany. I am a trained chef, and my main job is working in hotels, restaurants at the moment. I'm at the Bangkok Marriott Marquis Queen's Park, but always I've been quite passionate about sustainability and food systems. Um, for me, really, it's part of being a chef. Like, it's part of being a chef, thinking about where food comes from and where does it go after it's been in my kitchen. So food waste has become a topic that I have started working on more and more so. Since 2016, it's really sort of become my key topic that I've worked on in several different honorary positions outside of my main job. So I am a food waste ambassador for UN Environment in Bangkok. I'm also a food waste ambassador for the Scholars of Sustenance, which is a food bank in Bangkok in Thailand. And also I work closely as the honorary food waste ambassador with TCEP Thailand, which is the Thailand Convention and Exhibition Bureau, basically the government organization tasked with looking after business tourism in Thailand.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing with us your background. With the current situation of the COVID 19 crisis, what are the biggest impact of the crisis on your hotel kitchen and restaurant so far?
COVID crisis was something completely unexpected and something completely new, and none of us knew what to do and how to react at first. So it was a lot of questioning, a lot of reinventing ourselves. And if you know how food systems usually work or how restaurants are profitable, usually it's usually sort of routine and long-term improvements of processes that make a restaurant very profitable, or make a food business work really efficiently. So obviously disruptions like this are always critical in the food sector. So we had to relook at a lot of processes. The first obviously is hygiene. I do want to say that actually probably most food operators, all food operators that have before already been certified with HACCP or ISO 22000 or any similar hygiene standard, were probably already doing exactly the right thing. Now it's only been sort of something that was way more a spotlight and highlighted in the media, and also something customers were way more aware of. So just to reinforce that those standards are in place, make them more visible, just make sure that customers feel safe. That was one of the first key challenges. And then obviously, very quickly, that sort of led to other problems. Plastic is definitely a problem that's come back after years of working on slowly reducing plastic use. That's now definitely something that like the COVID crisis has certainly increased plastic use and disposable use massively in all food businesses, in all food operation. And when it comes to food waste, we also had the question, what does it do? Like, what happens when we have to serve our guests directly? What happens when sort of menus work differently and so on? And a lot of selling food is about the psychology of selling food, and about menu design, about how guests are approached. Also, like, don't underestimate things like how important it is they walk into a restaurant or bakery and it smells like something, and now you walk in there with a mask on and you don't notice the smell so much. So all of these disruptions and changes definitely impacted what sells and how we sell it. And all of this we have had to work on pretty quickly, but continue to work on now, because this is nowhere near complete. Regulations keep changing, and also we get better at dealing with those challenges and finding better solutions, and better sort of like experiences for the guest, and guaranteeing that our food quality is the same or better, but still making the business work somehow.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I think right now the hygiene is actually top priority of many businesses, especially those in service industry. So we all know that the COVID-19 has disrupted our global food supply chain. At the same time, it has also changed the eating habits of many. So in your opinion, why is it important to care about food and dealing with food waste during such a pandemic?
I think food is always extremely important. We should always deal with food. We're dealing with a virus infection, not too different from a flu infection or um, similar virus infections. So it is for me, there's no question that obviously your immune health, your autoimmune system, and your actual health can combat quite effectively how susceptible you are to an infection to this virus. So eating is number one when it comes to being healthy or having a healthy immune system. I think we still today underestimate, or often maybe are just often fed wrong informations about what makes us really healthy. And we've adapted this belief that we can just eat whatever we want, and then we take some medication when we're sick. When as actually, there's no question about the fact that you literally are what you eat. Also, when it comes to your autoimmune system health and your gut health and so on. So eating is very important, firstly and foremost, to keep us healthy, keep us fit, and keep us resistant against any threat, right, including this virus. So I think therefore it's worth to look out for what you're eating in the first place already, but then also add to it the insecurities now, also the mental insecurities for a lot of people. People have been locked up at home for a longer period of time. And often it is sort of food and family that brings this back together and brings in also a new direction of what we truly value. And you've seen this, I think you've seen it a lot on social media over these past months. People have turned to cooking, to baking, to making things at home, to find that sort of emotional stability and security and pleasure, something positive that obviously the information out there and the current world situation was not able to give them. And I think this is a sign also to how important food is to our emotional health and how it's worth looking out for that. And then you did mention food systems and supply chains. Like, any disruption is always a threat to how our food systems work. That is because food is traded through so many hands. There is so much happens in terms of also refining and value add, or actual cooking processes from harvest of an ingredient to what you actually buy in a supermarket or at a restaurant. So there's many steps in between, and food goes through many hands and is traded globally. Food prices are looked at globally. So any small disruption is already a problem and changes often pricing or changes margins, changes profit margins or availability of products. And now a massive disruption in our systems like this actually becomes visible, and it becomes very visible. And in some regions, you've seen supermarket shelves empty. And at the same time, you've seen farmers throwing away a lot of product that they couldn't sell anymore because their traditional supply chains all of a sudden went missing. So say a farmer that was specialized in growing specific heritage vegetables that go into high-end restaurants, all of a sudden all the restaurants were closed. Where and how can they sell their produce? So all of these disruptions lead to waste on the one hand side, lead to a lot of product that cannot be used, and on the other hand, they lead to shortage of products that are maybe needed. And therefore it is in times like these where it becomes very visible. But these problems are not specific to coronavirus crisis. That it happens all the time, and all the time food is wasted just because of supply and demand issues or supply chain issues or trading issues. All of us, all the time, we're throwing food away that it's perfectly fine to eat simply because the logistics don't work as well as we want them to, or they don't work as efficiently as we want them to, or just the demand changes. Say another food trends, or food gets a bad rap in the media and no one wants to buy it anymore. So these things happen constantly. And what we see now is just a sort of like bigger magnitude of this disruption. And therefore we can see, as a consumer, we can see direct effects to our supply chains. And that should be just a warning sign, or it should be something that indicates this is something that's worth looking into and improving. This is something that's worth understanding better, and not just forget about it after the crisis is gone and things seem back to normal, because this problem is a continuous problem we are facing in our food systems.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I totally agree. I think the COVID-19 crisis has actually highlighted the importance of food as one of our primary needs. However, despite all the challenges, do you see any opportunities from the crisis to tackle the food waste issue, especially in hospitality and tourism industry?
I do, but actually maybe I just realized, maybe let's go back to the previous question. I haven't sort of opened up. I just assumed all our listeners know what food waste is and how important it is. Maybe I do say a few words about just the general issue of food waste. People might still be unaware of the fact that up to 1/3 of all food that's produced globally actually ends up in a landfill or in a bin. This number is debated, and there's different views at it. The reason why the number is debated is because it is very hard to even measure that, because normally in the way we trade food, what goes in the bin has been paid for and isn't even measured. Like in a household, you can measure household waste, but you can only guesstimate how much of that is food waste and so on. In Thailand, the current number that we're going for is between 70 and 80% of the trash, like of household waste, is actually food. So a big number of waste is food. And then in other countries, this ratio is different. It depends on what systems are in place, say for composting and so on and so on. But in general, we can say that a huge portion of our waste is food. And now, why does this land in the bin? Well, it lands in the bin due to many different factors along the path of trading food. So when we imagine food systems, often we think sort of, oh, whatever, the milk comes from a farm and it goes in a bottle and it comes to me and I drink it. The reality is way more complicated than that. And quite often there's a lot of steps between farming and value add. Say the milk might be like turned into yogurt, or might be just run through a facility to make strawberry milk and so on, right? So in there already you have trading where people buy milk from many different farms. And when it comes to hamburgers, maybe you buy carcasses, like cow carcasses, from lots of different farms. They get bundled up somewhere and then they get turned into a hamburger patty that then contains a number of cows. And and then they get packed again and redistributed. They might be frozen, packed, and shipped to another country, where they then land with another distributor that sort of sells them or even resells them to another distributor before they even hit the end consumer at some point. So in every step of the way, obviously, I have some sort of process of quality control, some sort of process of sorting, and that also means some sort of loss at every step of the way. Now, in addition to that, you have the demand and supply problems that we talked about just before. So those might add to this problem additionally. So even with 100% predictable supply, which we never have in food systems, but even if you had that, it'd still be difficult just because food has very short shelf life to trade food without loss. But then with the add-on of change in demand, this just becomes multiplied. And that in mind, then when you purchase food at the supermarket or you buy something at the restaurant, you're not only buying whatever the 500 grams of minced beef that you actually pick up and put in your trolley, but you're also already purchasing a lot of waste that has been generated along the way. And then if you take that home and you leave it in your fridge and say you don't need it, and after 3 days you throw it in the bin, you've not only wasted the resources of this, but also the resources of all the supply chain along the way. And because we are used also to a lot of food being constantly available, we are not very accepting of something being, say, out of stock or not available anymore. And that immediately sort of raises panic, as we also saw now in the COVID crisis, when supermarkets didn't have certain stock items anymore. People panicked and they started to bulk buy and just like stock up on items which they're probably never going to eat. Like they just overbought them just because they were panicking that there was not enough food, which isn't the case. There was always enough food. It was just very difficult to fix those supply chain issues when they were occurring so suddenly. And so all of this food that's wasted is terrible in a lot of different ways. Firstly, obviously, because a lot of resources went in it, and a lot of good resources like fresh water, like energy, like land use are all wasted with the food being wasted. But then also additionally to that, that food ending up in a landfill like gives off methane gases and contributes massively to greenhouse gas emissions. So it's basically a double loss. Like we lose on the input side and on the output side, plus we lose a multiplier factor of the actual quantities we're losing. So any food, even just 10 grams of food that's wasted, has a dramatic effect on our global food systems and on making them more efficient and more sustainable.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for the insight. So, how can hotels, restaurants, and other food and beverage businesses manage food waste more sustainably, especially if we look at the cases of smaller scale businesses?
I think the first thing we need to do as a business is take it seriously. We need to admit that it is a serious problem. You'd be surprised, but every time I talk with a restaurant owner, a business owner, or a chef, the first answer is, "Oh, we don't have a problem with food waste." We don't have. We use whatever. Like we're aware of it, and we use the bones of our trimmings and put them in the stock, in the daily stock. And there is some practices that are just sort of regular practice in a restaurant that are sort of in the direction of fighting food waste. But it is not, like, generally it is not the norm to accept that it is a problem that every restaurant has. But generally I hear the first answer sounds like, "Oh, you're trying to blame me for food waste, and there's no food waste problem here." So I think the first thing any business has to do is everyone has this problem. Every food business has this problem, and don't feel like you're singled out, or don't feel like you are being blamed for something. It is a systemic problem. It is a global systemic problem. It's not the problem of one or two people doing something wrong. In fact, it's everyone's doing something wrong, and one or two people doing something right can already have an impact of making it better. So to look at this differently as a business owner, that's, I think, the first important step. Then the next step is go and look at where you are wasting and how much you're wasting. So you need a system of measuring and recording you need to start. And it can be as simple as, say, taking photos of what goes in your bin, or doing a daily audit and walking through and checking what's in bins, or starting a measuring system. It can be as complicated as putting in expensive tech to actually measure and record everything you're wasting. And this is very dependent on what size of business you are, how complicated your food operations are. There's different solutions that make sense for different kinds of businesses. But if you don't start to measure and record what it is you're wasting and how much you're wasting, you will not be able to put effective measures in place. So that for me is the second step. And then the third step is very depending on what business you are. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, and there's a lot of different starting points. I always recommend when I talk to business or consult business, advise business on how to do that, to start at the quick wins. Start somewhere where you actually see an impact very quickly, where you can report results very quickly, because that also gives you motivation to keep going, gives the team some motivation, and all of this is very important. What I do want to say is, no matter where you start, it is important to keep in mind that the most effective measures avoid waste from occurring in the first place. Whereas the easiest measures, and that's sadly what we see mostly in the industry, are diversion methods. So let me roll that up a little bit quickly. So when we look at the food waste pyramid, or when we look at where to tackle food waste, the best way to do this is right at the top. So not even producing the food, not even purchasing the food, not even making the food that is then wasted, because that way we have the biggest impact on a more efficient operation, also on cost, but also on sustainability, because obviously, as we discussed before, this multiplication factor is taken out of the account, right? Like if you manage to not purchase the food, you also didn't purchase all the waste along the way of it getting to you. But this one is the hardest to do, because this one is usually deep changes in systems of how we sell, how we produce, how we run our kitchens. But this is the one that ultimately has the biggest impact, both for you as a business and for the global food systems and the environment. What usually happens is, quite often the first thing businesses think of, or the first thing they want to do, is something like composting or food donation. And while all of these things are great to look at and are best practices and great examples, especially food donation, I think you cannot praise highly enough. It's definitely better if food is eaten by people than being thrown in the bin. So food donation is important. However, it is a diversion mechanism. So all you're doing is looking at the waste you've already produced and then finding new waste streams for it. And while I really encourage every business to do that, I just want to really stress that what is effective to avoid food waste is not letting it occur in the first place, and looking at how can I avoid it? How can I not even generate food waste in the first place? I also want to say that there is a lot of good resources by now, more and more. So there is quite a lot of stuff on the internet, and but also do feel free to reach out. There's a lot of help when it comes to food banking. There is Pata has released this beautiful guidebook last year, was it?
Yeah, the buffet. Yeah, the buffet.
The buffet framework, which also has a lot of helpful tips and tricks, and there's way more stuff online as well. WWF has the Hotel Kitchen project. There's the Champions 12.3. Like, if you're looking into this, just look for help, reach out, and then there is definitely a solution of where you can start easy and without investment.